Good evening, members, and welcome to this meeting of the Strategic Planning and Infrastructure Committee. I'm Olivia Parfitt, Democratic Services Officer, and I will take the committee through the first 3 items on the agenda. Before this, I would like to remind you that there is currently a one-way system in place, and we ask that the main staircase is used when coming up to the chamber, and the staircase by Committee Room B is used when exiting. If the fire alarm sounds during the meeting, please remain seated whilst members of the Democratic Services team assess the situation and give further instructions on the evacuation of the building if necessary. Tonight's proceedings will be webcast by the Council, but if anyone else is intending to record these proceedings, can you please let me know now? This is not to prevent you from doing so, but to ensure that members and other members of the public in the room know that this is taking place. I would also like to advise members that they should only address the meeting by way of their microphones and to remind them to turn their microphone off when they have finished speaking. The webcast will only pick up sound that comes directly from the microphone, and those joining us remotely will also only hear what is said directly into the microphone. So please take the time to ensure it is switched off before speaking. The meeting may also take longer than usual due to the COVID secure measures in place. Item 1, apologies. There are no apologies this evening. Item 2, notification of substitute members. There are no substitute members present. Item 3, election of chairman. Can I have nominations for the chairman, please? Councillor.
Thank you. I would like to nominate someone who, for the last 4 years, has been Vice Chair of Strategic Planning and Infrastructure. Vice Chair to a Conservative Councillor, David Burton, who's your current leader, the Conservatives' current leader. Together, they did an excellent job on SPY. And if you need reminding, the last 4 years was a Liberal Democrat-led administration. So therefore, I propose that Councillor Susan Griggs be appointed Chair of Strategic Planning and Infrastructure Committee.
Is that seconded? Sorry. Yes, Councillor Gregg. Yeah, that's fine. Are there any other nominations?
I'd like to nominate Councillor Paul Cooper, please.
And is that seconded? Councillor Springett. In which case, votes.
It's not usual to make statements at this point. Okay, and in which case you would automatically be withdrawn. But yes, please go ahead and make a statement.
In which case, Councillor Cooper, you have been appointed as chairman if you'd like to come and take your seat.
We move on to agenda item number 4, which is election of the Vice Chairman. From the Chair, I would like to propose Councillor Val Springett to be the Vice Chairman. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Spooner, thank you for seconding. Are there any other nominations for Vice Chairman? In that case, Councillor Springett, you will be the Vice Chairman. Thank you. I move on to item number 5, urgent items. There are no urgent items that I'm aware of, and the nodding agreement suggests that that is still the case. Item number 6 is notification of visiting members. Councillor Harper has given notification as a visiting member on items 16, 17 and 18. Councillor Perry has given notification for items 17 and 22. I can see Councillor Brindle, and I can see that obviously you are a visiting member this evening. Are there any particular items? Councillor Brindle has stated that she is just here to observe the meeting this evening. Item number 7 is disclosures by members and officers.
Excuse me, Chairman. Councillor Sams also as visiting member.
Apologies, it's sort of,
items 19 and 22.
it threw me there having people speaking to me on the webcast, so forgive me. And I understand that Councillor Janetta Sams is also a visiting member who is speaking on items 19 and 22. Thank you very much. Are there any other visiting members?
I believe Councillor Harper's at the back of the chamber, so I don't know if he's here as a visiting member or not.
That's already been noted. Thank you very much. I assume that there are no other visiting members in that case. So we will move on to item number 7, which is disclosures by members and officers. Are there any disclosures by members or officers? No one is indicating, therefore I will take that there are no disclosures. Item number 8 is disclosures of lobbying. Have any members been lobbied for this evening? In which case I will ask Ms. Parfitt to go around and ask each member in turn and what they have been lobbied on.
Thank you, Chairman. Have you been lobbied?
I haven't been lobbied.
Councillor Clark?
Matters relating to the local plan.
Councillor Garton?
Generally on all items regarding cycling parking, and generally as well on the local plan.
Councillor Mrs. Grigg?
All items of the local plan plus item 17.
Councillor Mackay?
17 and 22.
Councillor Mumford?
Item 20 and items relating to the local plan.
Councillor Russell?
Item 17.
Councillor Spooner? And Councillor Springett?
Sorry, microphone wouldn't come on. I actually don't think I have. I'm racking my brains, but I don't think I have.
Thank you very much. In that case, item number 9, which is to consider whether any item should be taken in private because of the possible disclosure of exempt information. I move, therefore, that items on the agenda be taken in public as proposed, because I can see no reason why anything should be taken in private. Is that agreed? Seems to be agreed. Item number 10 is minutes of the meeting held on April the 13th, 2021. Is there any, does anyone have any amendments that should be made to the minutes? No one is indicating. Therefore, I move that the minutes be agreed as stated in the agenda pack. Is that agreed? It's agreed. Thank you very much. Item number 11 is presentation of petitions. There are no petitions this evening that I'm aware of, and that's still the case. Item number 12 is question and answer session for members of the public. There is one question this evening. Mrs. Harwood, who I believe is on our webcast. Therefore, Mrs. Harwood, if you would like to ask your question, please. Mrs. Harwood was indeed on the webcast, and literally the second I suggested that Mrs. Harwood speak, she disappeared. She's now in the lobby, and we will see if she's back. If not, we'll move on and come back. Are we able to get Mrs. Harwood to speak? Mrs. Harwood, if you are able to speak, please do now.
Yes, hello.
Good evening. Mrs. Harwood, if you are able to hear us, please do ask your question now.
Thank you. With respect to Medway Council's duty to cooperate with the Lidsing Garden Village proposal on the local plan, are Medway indicating that they are supporting or objecting to the proposal?
Thank you very much for your question. Indeed, Medway Council have stated an objection to the Lidsing Garden community proposal. Mrs. Harwood, therefore, do you have a supplementary question arising out of the original question or my reply?
I have a question which is related to the Lidsing Garden proposal.
Please ask your question. However, I must state now that it must be related either to your original question or the answer that I've given, but please do state your supplementary question.
My supplementary question was, how can you justify ignoring the objections of over 1,700 people local to Lidsing to continue with the proposal?
Thank you very much for that, Mrs. Harwood. I don't believe that question was specifically related to either my response or your original question. However, I do understand the reasoning for your question. I don't have an answer that I can give you now. However, I will arrange for a written response to be given to you in relation to the local plan for Maidstone. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We now move on to item number 14, which is the committee work programme on pages 7. And are there any comments that anyone wishes to make on this? Councillor Mumford.
Yeah, it's just something that I would like to see included on our works programme. As part of the JR that we went through, the Maidstone Strategic Infrastructure Working Group was set up. This was members from Maidstone and KCC. And I welcome this, and I expected infrastructure projects to come leaping forward, 106 money to be used and released. However, I've been disappointed. When that was set up, it came to this committee, and I think it's within our remit and completely within our remit. And I would like to see a report come to this committee based on the effectiveness, the performance to date, and the membership of that working group. So that's the effectiveness, performance to date, and membership. And I think it's very important because I'm not sure, am I the only member that's been sorely disappointed at the results of it? And I think it's about time that we looked at it and got a report on it. So I'd like to move that that's included on our works programme.
Councillor Mumford, I completely agree, and I would be more than happy. I think it's essential that we do report back based on the comments that you've just made now. So if you do need a seconder for that, I'm more than happy to second that we have a report back to this committee at the earliest convenience. Next, I've got Councillor Springett and then Councillor Grigg.
Thank you. I'm not quite sure if this is covered under non-spatial policies, but I would like us to not overlook updating some of our underlying SPDs that have let us down in the past. I mean, you've got SP17 is the classic. I think that probably is a spatial policy, but I'm not sure. But I just would like us to strengthen the policies that Planning Committee are trying to work to on an everyday basis, because we've had occasions where they have proved not as strong as we thought. So I don't want those to get lost under all the housing sites. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Springett. That's certainly noted. And Mr. Jarman, if you'd like to speak.
Yeah, could I just answer Councillor Springett's point? You know, all the policies, be they strategic policies or development management policies, have been set out in the Regulation 18B, which you've approved for consultation. So in there is a policy equivalent to SP17, and then obviously planning officers are working on a revised policy taking account of what people said as a result of consultation on 18B, and that would be presented to you as a Regulation 19. Thank you. As would all the, what are called the non-spatial policies.
Thank you. I think it's because I wasn't on this committee last year, I might have missed out. I just wanted to make sure that they were going to get scooped up and strengthened. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, I've got Councillor Grigg and then Councillor Garton and then Councillor Mumford again.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd like to go back a little bit on what Councillor Mumford brought up about the Strategic Infrastructure Working Group. I was part of that last year, and as I believe you were yourself as well. And it was set up under the terms of the conditions put forward by the JR, and it was politically balanced. So when that report comes back, can I make a request, please, that we actually see the membership who is actually on that committee, and I'd also like to see a performance report on what's actually been achieved to date against the conditions of the JR.
Thank you very much, Councillor Grigg. And as I commented to Councillor Mumford, I completely agree with the sentiments of what you're saying, and I appreciate that there have been some political changes which have necessitated us to look at this. Councillor Garton, please.
Mr. Chairman, as the committee's representative on the AO&B Joint Advisory Committee, I raised way back, I think it was our March or February meeting, the need of this committee to have greater impact on matters relating to AO&B. At the time we were discussing the AO&B management plan, and it was made clear to this committee that the AO&B management plan, although it is a major consideration in planning decisions, it is virtually, to a large extent, a delegated power. And the previous chairman then took it on board to consider whether matters of A&B and the A&B management plan should be brought back to this committee, and this committee having a greater input. So if you would like to take that on board together with the chair of planning. The other issue I would like to raise is next month's meeting, where we have performance monitoring reports. Now, I can only speak from my ward, and I've got several cases of planning breaches being reported and not being acted upon, or very slowly acted upon. So I think our KPIs next month will show rather disappointing figures, just based on my own experience. So maybe if we could ask the head of planning to give us some advice at next month's meeting, possibly make a report whether he has enough resources in planning enforcement, or whether his department actually requires resources, stronger resources, to actually fulfill his duties.
Thank you very much, Councillor Garton. And Mr. Jarman has actually indicated he wishes to speak on this matter anyway.
Yeah, sorry, Chairman. Yes, yeah, I'll be part of the team, as Councillor Garton said, that responds on, you know, the quarterly reporting of KPIs. Sorry, I was just going to ask for clarity in terms of conservation area funding opportunities. I'm conscious that last time this committee met in April, we brought an update report on conservation area appraisal and management works programme, just an update on that. And I'm not terribly clear on what's required of me for this new report.
Thank you very much. Perhaps we will pick that up at a convenient point in the not too distant future. Next to speak, I have Councillor Mumford again, please.
Yeah, it was really where Councillor Springett was looking at policies. She looked specifically at SP17. We have something currently going on where we have a development of 50 houses, 40% affordable homes. And they've upped it to 100% affordable homes. Now, that is not still liable. The development is, so we lose all of the SIL, all the infrastructure funding from that site. And when they bring the policies, or when they're looking at this, how can we guard against that in the future? We should have a policy, because at the moment, I think we're passing planning applications at a minimum 40% affordable housing. And that leaves it for a developer to drive coaching horses through and change it from 40% to 100%, and we lose all of the infrastructure monies. So I would ask the planners that when they bring back policies, they explain that and how we can get over it.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Obviously, we need a new affordable housing policy in the local plan review, given the government's firm commitment to first homes. But on your point, Councillor Munford, and I've been discussing this matter today with Mr. Fitzpatrick, if the committee so wishes, and it's Councillor Spooner's committee, with every section 106 agreement with regard to affordable housing, it's capped at 40%, so that's explicit in the section 106 agreement.
Were you indicating to come back, Councillor Mumford?
So this one at Lenham won't go up to 100% affordable. It will cap at 40% then, and we will see the SIL money.
No, sorry, we can't do it retrospectively, and it's not just the site you're referring to, Lenham. Obviously, over the years, I can think of a number of sites developed along the River Medway, which became 100% affordable housings, because registered providers bought the sites off in the main volume house builders. But a solution, if the concern is putting a cap on it, then that is made explicit in the relevant Section 106 agreement. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Nobody else is indicating to speak. Therefore, I move that the work programme be noted. Thank you. We move on to item number 15, which is reports of outside bodies. There are no reports of outside bodies. The outside body positions associated with this committee will be advertised in the near future, with any nominations to be presented at the next meeting of the committee. And item number 16, which is reference to the Economic Regeneration and Leisure Committee. Olivia, are you introducing this one? Councillor Harper, would you like to introduce this, because you were the chairman of the committee at the time? Thank you.
Thank you, yes. The item on Loch Meadow was discussed in great depth back in February, and a big concern raised at Economic Regeneration and Leisure Committee was around the Section 106 monies which have been allocated from sites such as McDonald's and so on, with a proviso that they be used to improve traffic movements and traffic flows in that area. No work has to date been done in terms of making any improvements to Hart Street and Barker Street. And so the committee, when considering it, moved that it would ask this committee to look into what's happened to those Section 106 monies, considering that the McDonald's was built about 8 years ago now. And on the face of it, it would appear that the Section 106 money hasn't been applied, or if it's been used, it's not been used in terms of improving traffic in the area. So that was the reason why the committee was very concerned and sent this forward to yourselves. The other thing I'd just mention is that subsequent to the committee, there is a meeting to be held with ward councillors for Fan, including myself, and Kent County Council's Highways Department to actually look at some proposals now which may help improve the situation. But we are concerned, as I say, around what's happened to the Section 106 monies associated with McDonald's. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Harper. Can I ask members who do wish to speak on this, thank you very much, Councillor Clark, if you could speak first. Anyone who wishes to speak, if you could tip your name plate up, and then I will make a note, hopefully in order, that you put it up. Thank you. So, Councillor Clark, apologies.
Thank you. Yes, I would like to. I'd like to propose the recommendation for this committee as verbatim as listed on page 8. I do think this should come back to this committee. It is a concern to many people that use that area. We've had a lot of debate on this in the past in this committee, or whenever we've talked about the road network and infrastructure generally with the local plan. And I think we should put this on I'd like to propose that we put this on the work programme with a date and a paper to come back to this committee.
Thank you very much.
Sooner rather than later, perhaps by autumn.
Thank you very much, Councillor Clark. I apologise, members. Councillor Perry, who is a visiting member, I should have called him to speak first on this item. So I propose obviously now Councillor Perry speaks, and then we will continue. So Councillor Perry, do you wish to speak on this item? There is silence. He's trying. Here we go.
Sorry, I was mouse chasing. It's agenda item 17 I wanted to speak on. Which agenda item are we on?
So I am very sorry. We're currently on agenda item 16. So I will call. I would love to blame it on. I would love to blame it on Olivia, but I was none the wiser anyway. So I will call you to speak on the next agenda item.
Thank you, Chair.
Apologies. I have Councillor Springett next, then Councillor Garton, and then Councillor Grigg. Please.
Thank you. I'm happy to second Councillor Clark's proposal. I've seen the queuing around that area, and something does need to be done. And if there's money sitting in a pot not being used, I think we do need to chase up. It might be a matter to have a report brought to JTB, possibly after, if there's a meeting going on that Councillor Harper referred to. So that's something we could perhaps think about as to whether report on that and what's happening with that. But I think we need to review what's holding up the Section 106 money. Is it KCC holding up the design, or is it us not quite knowing what to do with the money? So I'll second Councillor Clark. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next to speak, I have Councillor Garton.
Mr. Chairman, I've been sitting here for a few years now, and every time some similar issues comes up to this committee, I'm just trying to pull my hair out, and that's why there's very little left. We've got similar problems with the Wheatsheaf Junction improvement, where money is in the kitty and it just doesn't appear to be done, any work being tackled with it. I think realistically, we as a district council can only note this recommendation. I would like to hear either from you as a new chairman or from the officer, what else could we effectively do to compel the Highways Authority to actually do something about this money being held in backlog and work not being progressed. I simply think that this committee doesn't have any further powers but to note.
Mr. Jarman.
Thank you, Chairman. As Councillor Walton described, when a developer reaches a trigger point for residential development, that's usually 50% of the houses completed, then money is transferred to Maidstone Borough Council, and then whoever it's going to, be it KCC, Education, or the NHS, then in effect a bid is made, and I sign off the Section 106 monies. I need to know a breakdown of costs, timelines, all the basic project management stuff. So, it is up to the infrastructure providers to make their bids for that money.
Well, is there any way that we can compel the infrastructure provider other than sitting here month after month in this committee and simply note that the infrastructure provider doesn't provide? Because obviously from what you're saying, Mr. Jarman, we have the money, we are willing to provide the money, it's just the infrastructure provider letting us down.
Patrick will come in, but obviously in the original planning committee report, the infrastructure provider, be it KCC Education, has to say, we demand X amount of money and it is going to a new primary school, an extension to a primary school, a ballpark breakdown of costs and the timelines. So a sort of draft project plan should be approved, in effect, by planning committee, because we will always in the future be going back to that. So provided we've got that in the first place, then that gives us leverage to say to the infrastructure provider, well, you asked for this amount of money, you need to spend it on what you asked for. But I'm sure Mr. Fitzpatrick can articulate it better than me.
Sorry. The short answer to your question, Councillor Garton, is, well, we had the Sutton Road experience where we tried that. And that ended up with the Strategic Infrastructure Working Group, which was there to deliver on and have discussion to deliver on what was secured under Section 106 funding. So highways is a difficult one because it does rely on KCC buy-in. And it also depends on what the terms of the Section 106 are. So often with the older agreements, there isn't a form of consistency in drafting across it. So there could be, for example, a time limit on if that money isn't used, it's to be repaid. So at best, I think what Councillor Springett is suggesting of having a report to find out where the money is, what's happened with it and who's doing what with it is probably a starting point, and then we can start making decisions as to how we can it may end up, as Councillor Springett has pointed out, going to JTB to start that process going. But then again, that's what the infrastructure, the Strategic Infrastructure Working Group was set up for, following on from that judicial review, which was about the spending of Section 106 monies. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you very much. Next to speak, I have Councillor Clark and then Councillor Springett.
Thank you, Chairman. So I think clearly we don't know where we are with this. We've got statutory consultees that come to planning. We are strategic planning after all. and they will say, if you're going to do that, we will need this to mitigate. That's happened, and we really do, as Mr. Fitzpatrick said, we just need to work out how they're performing against what the commitment was when it was, well, when the funds were requested. I did want to distinguish the wheat sheaf, however, because that funding is actually from the South East LEP. That's not part of Section 106 or SIL money through planning. The Willington Street and Wallace Avenue is collected from planning, and again, those funds were collected by KCC because they saw that as the mitigation for the Langley developments. But yeah, I think, you know, given the discussion here, we don't know where we are. It's a long time forward. We should ask for a report to say, you know, how are we performing based on what we said when it went to planning.
Thank you very much. And next to speak, I have Councillor Springett and then Councillor Russell.
Thank you. I think we're all trying to get to the same place. I think perhaps would the best procedure be to ask for a report to come to JTB? Councillor Clark might be able to advise me better as another... Sorry.
I mean, we are strategic planning for Maidstone. We went through a process with this site. I feel we should know, you know, we should audit before we go to JTB, because if we go to JTB and say we're not sure what's going on with Section 106, I think it would look very foolish.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Russell.
Hi, just a question, probably. I've seen a Section 106 monitoring report come to this committee before, and it's been colour-coded and it's got spend dates on it. I just really wondered where that ends up, what happens to it, where does it come back? Because it seems like everyone's got a similar issue on how we're keeping track of the Section 106 and where it is and timelines. So it's just a question on that, really.
The eternal question. Mr. Jarman.
Yeah, it's a new requirement, but we produced our first infrastructure funding statement in December of last year. So obviously we'll have to provide one again this year as well. But you know what Section 106 monies are spent on, and the same for SIL is contained in that document.
Thank you very much. I don't believe I have anyone else to speak. Therefore, Councillor Clark has proposed a motion, which has been seconded by Councillor Springett. Councillor Clark, would you, for the benefit of the minutes, repeat what your motion is for this, please?
I'm proposing that we have a report that comes back to this committee to monitor how we are performing with the spending of Section 106 funds in the Lock Meadow vicinity in relation to what was required by the statutory consultees on infrastructure at the time of the planning application.
Thank you very much, Councillor Clark. So that's proposed by Councillor Clark and seconded by Mrs. Springett. Is there any dissent from that? There isn't. I don't believe I'm required to hold a formal vote. So that's now the substantive motion, which I can't imagine anyone is going to vote against. So again, is there any dissent? Thank you very much. That's carried. In which case, we move on to item number 17, which is options to procure cycle and scooter hire schemes in Maidstone, which is pages 10 to 27 in your agenda pack. This report is going to be introduced by Alex Wells. I'm looking around, and of course, he is on the screen. So, sorry, I'm very sorry, Alex, we are struggling to hear you. It's like you're in outer space currently.
Is there any improvement now?
Yeah, I think we can hear you now.
Perfect. Well, if everything's working, I'll get started then. I'd like to begin just with a quick verbal update. specifically relating to the viability of electric scooters as a mode of transport for the hire scheme. The report referred specifically to micromobility as an all-encompassing term for pedal cycles, as well as electrically assisted cycles and electrically assisted scooters. The preferred option anticipates using an output-based specification to set key sites and outputs that we expect from operators, but allowing them and allowing the market flexibility in how specifically they achieve this, which we would then score their submissions accordingly. We used a similar model before for the most recent park and ride procurement, which until COVID had been successful in reducing cost to council, improving the service to the public and increasing uptake. But since publishing the report, I've received clarification from the Department for Transport on the status of future trial schemes for electric scooters. Currently, for an authority to operate an electric scooter hire scheme, they need to apply to central government in order to operate an according or an all-encompassing trial scheme. Whilst we were aware of this, we were awaiting clarification on whether the existing trial scheme application process would be extended or renewed at the start of next year. And the DFT have now responded advising that there is currently no opportunity for any other local authorities to participate in these, at least until they release any further updates or findings based on the initial first wave of trial schemes. What this means in relation to the report is that if the preferred option is successful, then any procurement carried out subsequently would exclude electronic scooters as a mode of transport. However, pedal cycles and electric assisted cycles will remain as options. The wording of all report options will remain the same, as we still wish to allow flexibility for the various cycle hire scheme models who may wish to bid, and the wording of the options wasn't such that it was tied down to any specific mode of transport. So that being said, the content and recommendations of the report remain the same, and I'll now move on to my summary of the report. This report provides a high level of overview of the available options for procuring a micromobility hire scheme. Rather than focusing on details such as types of transports, specific locations and the overall number, we're focusing on which demographic to target the scheme to. Whether that's the leisure or weekend user, the commuter, or a hybrid model which caters for both. The report is not an examination of the pros and cons of active transport, which has been covered several times within our own corporate strategies, but is rather a high-level overview of the benefits and risks associated with each option. At a glance, micromobility hire schemes, particularly after several lockdowns, cater to a growing audience who want convenient, active ways of travelling around town, or to and from work without the inconvenience or high cost related to having to buy your own personal transport and either carry it on the train or in the car. Option 1 is a leisure offering catering to a more casual weekend user. However, evidence suggests that it's greatly impacted by seasonal fluctuations and poor weather, meaning that we would likely see lower usage figures midweek and out of season, especially as we live in the UK, which isn't known for its sunshine. And this would likely result in a successful bid requiring heavy subsidy or not having as heavy an impact as we'd like to see. Option 2 is a commuter offering catering to town centre workers, in particular low-income workers, offering a lower-cost active alternative to existing commuting options. As this caters to a consistent user group through Monday to Friday, it would likely be a more stable and subsequently financially better performing option than option 1. Making it also more viable as an option for bidders. Additionally, as it will capture more service users, it would also give us a better foundation of data to analyse the success of the service. Option 3 is a hybrid model catering to both audiences and requiring little additional anticipated cost over option 2, as the additional site already sits between the sites proposed in option 2 and provides the benefits of both options 1 and 2. Whilst also having the added benefit of potentially converting leisure users to commuting users with transference from people who may use it on a weekend to build confidence and then decide that it's viable as a commuting choice. And option 4 is our do-nothing option, which really has, I suppose, no loss and no gain in the grand scheme of things. Option 3 is the preferred option, due to it having the highest potential impact, whilst also providing a more viable operational commercial model for suppliers. The data gathered over this trial period will be continuously monitored and collated after the first year so that we can identify the effectiveness of the scheme on meeting our strategic goals. This will continue to be monitored until the end of the contract and will allow us to make more effective and informed decisions in the future about how micromobility fits into our transport strategies. If the preferred option is chosen, we'll prepare a specification with an aim to go out to market by July or August and appoint a successful supplier by September to October. Additionally, I'd like to place some context around potential financial impact, which I can appreciate wasn't gone into in depth in the report. Regarding the pricing, whilst we do have an understanding of costings for various schemes, especially cycle-based schemes, based on previous market testing and new market research, the findings of these were mostly commercially sensitive, and we also received some requests for them to not be published, and they were quite varied. It's fair to say, though, as a scheme at the moment was almost a trial, we'll be looking for a best case scenario of no cost to the council, which will be made clear in any invitation to tender documentation. And beyond that, we will look to minimise costs to ensure that any successful scheme, as per the procurement process, is viable. That being said, I'd like to invite any comments or questions.
Thank you very much for that, Alex. I'll go to visiting members first. I do understand that Councillor Perry wishes to speak on this item.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Actually, the wind has been taken out of my sails a bit, because it was my particular concern was with electric scooters, which I have seen in practice en masse, and I know that they're a safety issue and an accident waiting to happen in some cases. But now that's been taken out of the option, I have no problem with what's being proposed. But if it was going to come back in, then I'd like to see the safety aspect of this thoroughly looked into, because I have seen one or two, should I say, accidents involving these things. So that's all I really wanted to say. So I'll be brief on this one. I'm happy with what's being proposed, but the electric scooters was what was worrying me, and the safety issues attached to them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Perry. Did any other visiting members wish to speak on this? Councillor Harper, please come forward.
Thank you, Chair. I've had quite a lot of discussions over the weekend with colleagues from the Maidstone Cycle Campaign Forum about this report, and we welcome the concept. So the idea of having a cycle hire scheme in Maidstone is one the Cycle Campaign fully supports. I'm a bit surprised by the quality of the report, considering discussions have been going on for well over 2 years into looking at cycle hire schemes in Maidstone. And the report we've got before us seems rather, to be honest, rather shallow. There seems to be no effort has been done to discuss this with the Maidstone Cycle Campaign Forum, which I know the current leader of the council is planning to hold a meeting with to ensure that when cycling issues are considered, is that the Maidstone Cycle Campaign Forum is integral to the decision-making process and getting professional input from people who actually know about the topic. That clearly hasn't been done with the report you have before you this evening. Unfortunately, I think it's a rather poor scheme. I think one of the things to bear in mind is you're only going to get one shot at this. You know, I know there's a reference that this can be trialled out for a year, but if this proves to be the wrong type of scheme, after a year, the appetite for doing something different is unlikely to be there, either from the council or from the wider community. So I think it would have been good to have a better scheme brought before us. I've been involved myself in discussions with officers over these 2 years, looking at various things, looking at using the hospital sites, looking at the London Road Park and Ride, as well as the other park and ride sites, looking at major education sites around the town and around, you know, the wider borough, and none of that really seems to be here. What we've seen to come up with is 5 sites, none of which actually, in terms of the town centre, at the main transport hubs. We don't seem to have entered into discussions with Network Rail or South Eastern Trains, so we're looking at something sort of opposite Maidstone East and something, you know, about a quarter of a mile away from Maidstone West stations. So as I say, whilst I support the concept, and I think it's a really good one and something I would want us to follow up, I've got quite a lot of concerns on this proposal as you have it before you, because as I say, you're only really going to get one chance at this, and if this proves to be unsuccessful, then we've potentially lost an opportunity to encourage people to cycle in Maidstone for commuting and leisure purposes in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Harper. So to speak, I've got Councillor Springett, then Councillor Clark, and then Councillor Garton. Councillor Springett, please.
Thank you. I mean, first of all, I'm delighted they've taken scooters out, because I was going to ask for it to be taken out until we know more about them, because I know the Kent Police and Crime Commissioner has asked the Transport Secretary to halt any trials until we know a bit more about the safety elements. So I'm delighted on that. I totally agree with Councillor Harper, absolutely. We've only got 5 sites. With option 3, we've only got 5 sites. And I just don't see how we're giving it a fair chance with only 5 sites. I think this might be a bit early. We're very, very just post-lockdown, getting our feet back. So I'm wondering whether we might do better to perhaps defer this for 6 months and wait till life is hopefully back to normal to get a proper trial. What Councillor Harper's saying is correct, Councillor Mackay. He's absolutely correct. We're going to do a half-hearted trial. We need more than 5 park-up points. If your place of work is nowhere near the town centre bus station, why you can use a hire bike to cycle into the centre of town and then walk 10 minutes in the other direction? Because you might as well do the walk from the station in the first place. So I do think we need a bit more work done on this and a bit more detail. I'm just concerned there's only 5 sites, and I think it's too limited to give us a fair trial. So I would propose that we defer this perhaps 3 months until, let's see if life goes back to normal, perhaps 6 months, wait until discussions have been had, perhaps with the Cycle Forum. So I'm open on a time scale, but I just think perhaps we need to just kick this down the road. I'm not against it. And actually, I would also like to suggest that perhaps the council consider a cycle loan scheme to families that perhaps can't afford to buy their own bicycle that might like one, that we could have a long-term hire scheme, possibly something else to put on the table that might work better, so you could go door to door rather than using a particular stop. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Springett. So I understand that that's a proposal that we defer this item until there is more information available. You were unclear on timescale. Might I suggest that it be something that you and I, as Chairman and Vice Chairman, could pick up with the relevant officers to bring back to this committee? Would that be acceptable?
I'm happy to do that. And I also think we've got no idea of costing in here. We don't know which budget it's coming from. There's no idea of what the cost will be to have 5 stops or 10 parking stops. So I think it would be good to involve the Cycle Forum, and I just think we could, if members are happy, I'm happy to do that. I just think we need to delay it a little bit.
Thank you very much, Councillor Springett. Next, I've got Councillor Clark, then Councillor Garton, and then Councillor Mackay.
I wonder if we're going to defer, whether you may consider a 3-month check into this, because I just feel that we're going to lose it otherwise potentially. I do share Councillor Harper's disappointment on. When you look at this report, it clearly guides you, I feel, to option 3, because really, if you're going to do a trial, you may as well look at it from all angles. You may as well, especially when Moat Park is concerned, because we've already set up the cycle lane towards Moat Park. This committee changed it I actually made the recommendation that we changed it at the entrance to go in on the left-hand side, and we have pavement all the way through the park to the park and ride. So we've got a great opportunity there as it stands. I was quite hoping that we would get some sort of creative thinking on the other park and ride in town, because if we can anchor around those points, we can win hearts and minds a little more, perhaps. So I'm happy that we do defer it. I think we really do need a lot more information in this report. I do wonder if I can speak to the officer or ask the officer. The time frame of July, August it seems quite aggressive. It sounds almost like you've got something to go out to tender sort of at the moment. Is there more in that tender than we're seeing in this report?
Thank you for the question. Thank you for the related comments as well. At the moment, we don't have a specification of the related petitions prepared. But that being said, with other examples and with previous experience of similar projects, the kind of tender we would have would be able to be produced around 4 to 6 weeks. Specification would be able to be produced 4 to 6 weeks. Regarding the lack of details, I can totally understand members' concerns there, and a lot of that is in part down to the kind of procurement we were looking to do. In essence, really leaving the operational side of it, and really some of the expert input to the people we consider to be experts themselves, which is the suppliers. There's also a huge variety of different schemes. So we look at some docked schemes, which I think were mentioned. In addition, there are dockless schemes, which are also very viable for Maidstone and could, in theory, provide better coverage, better affordability and better usability for people. But trying to encompass all of these within one report really became something of a mess. So instead, the decision was made to try and keep it high level and leave the in-depth decision-making to the market, which is something we previously tried with Park and Ride with great success. But I appreciate that probably wasn't clear within the scope of the report. So I'm happy for the deferral there. And hopefully that's kind of addressed your question as well.
Thank you very much, Alex. Next to speak, I have Councillor Garton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In response to the previous speakers, as far as scooters is concerned, I can't personally see any problems with that. There may be some insurance problems which need sorting out, but any type of road transport is dangerous, and I think more people get killed by cars than by electric scooters, certainly at the moment. So I'm ambivalent whether we take it in or take it out or put it in. More to the point of the preferred sites here and what has been said by members and officers alike this evening. I think we need a provider which has a lot of commercial alternatives up their sleeve. Now, if I put myself into the head of a potential provider, I would say, oh yeah, that's 6 sites or 5 sites. I can work with it, but it wouldn't make my project viable. I would like to have local shops involved in it. We want to branch out further. I mean, we want to have people coming from further afield, from the rural communities, park their cars somewhere in Seneca or whatever, and then take the bike into Maidstone, or take the bike from Seneca into Moat Park or something. I personally can't even see myself using this scheme just by these 5 sites. So if a commercial provider would work with local shops, for example, as docking stations providers, that would be something which would be really, really sensible. So either we have the chance of deferring it, and I'm very careful by supporting this, because deferring usually means kicking in the tall grass. Or we tell the officer to go out, get providers, and possibly them to give us a briefing. And that way we can see who is the provider with the most alternative ideas suitable for Maidstone. And we can give the from a member level, give the provider some steer what we would like them to do, besides the bare minimum. I think that may be possibly a good step forward to go for a provider briefing to members, if there are already an alternative set of providers available.
Thank you very much, Councillor Garton. Next to speak, I have Councillor Mackay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I think Patrick, ironically, has said a lot of what I was going to say. Firstly, on the subject of scooters, the last time I was on a scooter was probably 60 plus years ago. And even 60 plus years ago, there were people that would wave their handbags at me or whatever as a sprightly 8-year-old. I didn't have the power of electricity, but I had the power of youth. But it's very easy to jump on the bandwagon and say, no, we don't want scooters in Maidstone. There'd be, you know, the whole point about this is it's an experiment. So I'm disappointed that scooters, I know it's outside our control, are off the agenda, but I understand that. I'm a little bit disappointed that at the first SPI meeting, what I hear is, oh, can we just delay that? Can we put that back 6 months? You know, this Paul Harper's been here saying their committee's been discussing this for 2 to 3 years. And where I absolutely 100% agree with Patrick here is, and this is probably the first, isn't it, Patrick? Yeah? Yeah, well, one of the two. Is when he says, let's ask the experts. What we're going out to the market with is to say, we'd welcome a scheme such as this. What are your proposals? And by the way, we don't want it to cost us anything. So if we prescribe precisely where the sites are going to be, what number of vehicles, you know, it's going to be ridiculous. We're not experts at this, but we want to come back with a scheme that's viable, ambitious, and attractive. I mean, I get the fact that we would need to tell providers that we own these sites and therefore there would not be a cost involved, yeah? I get that. But to be prescriptive in where, when, how, you know, I want to give you some latitude to be inventive and come back and surprise us and come back with a... And we know as councillors, we don't have to ask for things to be kicked in the long grass. Officers and the constraints of where we are will mean this is going to be a time-consuming process. So get on with it, Mr. Wells, and come back and surprise us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next to speak, I have Councillor Springett.
Thank you. So, I hear exactly what you're saying, Councillor Mackay, and I don't want to kick it into the long grass, but I do want a scheme, if we're going to do it, that's going to work. The fact that the prices that Mr. Wells got were to be kept confidential doesn't stop us being presented with them on yellow pages, as it happens. So, perhaps my proposal should be that this is deferred for perhaps 3 months max. Is that still too long? And we go out, no, but encompassing in that, we ask him to bring back the commercial quotes that Patrick and yourself are suggesting. In other words, we go to the market and say, what could you offer us? And I don't think they could do it in a month, being realistic. I think they probably might struggle in 3 months. But could we, as part of that report, go to the operators and say, what would you propose? And pick up what Councillor Mackay is saying. Here are the sites that you could use, but what could you offer us and at what cost? I don't think they could do it in a month, but so it might need 3 months. But I'm not trying to get rid of it. I'm just trying to say it's no good trialling something that I don't think will work in its current form.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mackay and then Councillor Clark.
I'll be very quick. The report states, the report makes the following recommendations to this committee. Point 2, Following the procurement exercise, details of the successful bid be provided the committee for noting. So, I mean, so all we're instructing the officer to go out and test the market, surely. Why do we need to delay further? He will come back and say, this is what the market, these are the prices we've got. And his ambition is that there will be a zero cost to this council. So, why do you want to do the exercise twice?
I don't want to do it twice, but that's still using at the sites that we've told them. So we'd have to amend that if we're going to go down that ride. That's fine. They probably know better where to put the... I like the idea of dockless, actually. But you do get them left everywhere, I gather. But dockless means you're not prescribing where people have to go to and from. I don't know. I'll throw it open to further discussion. I do hear what you're saying. Councillor Clark, I think you might have some ideas.
Councillor Clark, please.
I mean, I think we can move this on. I think that what we really need to make a decision on is the spirit of what's in this paper, regardless of the sort of prescriptive how we move forward with the contractor. And I hope that everyone in this committee would be open to the idea of keeping this open for commuter and leisure, because I think if we start to constrain it at this point, we've really, as far as I see this report, there's three options, and it's really what is our appetite. And I personally feel, and I'd be happy to propose, that we at least indicate that there is an aspiration that we include leisure and commuter. In terms of these sites, we could say that we want to, our initial thinking is to, or our preferred sites are these. I really do think that as part of option 3, we should add the other park and ride site. I'm not saying they may come back and they may say it would be completely unfeasible for this one or this one, but I think what we could do is go to them and say, this is our list, add the extra park and ride, because really, if people are not cyclists and they don't want to put a muddy cycle in their car, they will still be inclined to drive to a park and ride and then get on a rental bike. So I think that's a key aspect of success. So I just feel that we could let the officer continue, and rather than just nail it here and say this is all we're going to get, we should make an indication to the contractor that we engage with, or the contractors, that this is what this committee would, this is our aspiration. And then if they come back and they say we can't do this or we can't do this, and they give us data, we can review that at a later decision, at a later committee meeting.
Thank you. I think we're getting somewhere now. Councillor Clark, I think there was a proposal in there somewhere, and I'm sorry to labour it, I just want to be really clear of what you were proposing, because I think it's quite important.
Well,
if we do go over.
I'd be surprised actually if members of this committee wanted to narrow it down any more than keeping it at commuter and leisure. So I think we should go with option 3. In terms of the recommendation, we've got option 3. Let me see. Provides the core benefit. I think we've just got to put something in there where we allow the officer to go forward with the sentiment of option 3, engage with contractors, and test what the market can come back with those guidelines, and bring it back to this committee in 3.
So can I be, I'm sorry, I don't want to sound stupid, I just want to make sure that we're all clear here before we move forward, that we'll go with the preferred option, option 3, but that it is to come back to this committee to be decided upon.
Yes, well, we've actually got proposals from the people that will be able to give us the data.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor, that makes sense. Next to speak, I have Councillor Russell.
Oh, sorry.
Just a quick one, really. I agree with what Councillor Garton and Councillor McKay said. I think you should leave that to we should try and leave that to the experts about exactly what the scheme would be. and that it should come back. I just wondered whether there could be a cost associated with that report when it comes back, because I think with the best will in the world we can all have great aspirations, but if they're going to cost more than what the best case scenario was, which was no cost to the council, it'd be good to know those costs.
Apologies, as I'm sure you could see, I was speaking to Democratic Services. I understand that there's quite a lot of difficulty once we're reported back, once things have gone out to tender. There is practically no scope for this committee to then change things. So it is generally better for a discussion to take place. So I wonder, Alex, before we have anyone else in the committee, if you could just sort of represent what your views are on this, because I think whatever proposal we go ahead with now, we need to make sure that it is done in the best possible faith and that we do not back ourselves into a corner, either needing to accept something which is substandard unwittingly, or taking options off the table. So Alex, if you could comment on that, that would be appreciated.
Thank you all for the range of comments, all useful. With regards to finding an outcome here really and trying to get it into an option that I think people can agree, there are probably a couple of things we could do. I appreciate the comments that Democratic Services have probably made around going out to procurement and then bringing it back here for members to make a decision on, and I believe that's something that's not really viable. So in terms of options for getting more information to members, which I think is definitely needed, and engaging in more of a dialogue, the two options, as I see it, would be either going out and conducting some soft market testing to gain information from suppliers on what a submission may look like and understand more the scopes available, whether docked schemes or dockless schemes are viable, and what they would look like in operation and the costs associated with them. So I think we could go out to soft market testing and have that presented back to SPI at a period to be decided by members. And similarly, I think the points about engaging with the Maidstone cycle groups are equally as important. So another option could be, and particularly getting member engagement. I appreciate it was kind of difficult beforehand, purely because of elections, but now that we've got a full house, I think we're in a better position to actually engage with the market directly. It's perfectly feasible for us. I know they were talking about a deferral. I know some people were in favour and some were against, but if the deferral route is where we want to go, then I think certainly we're in a position where we could defer for a set period of time, and we can use that time to invite suppliers in, I think firstly for a member presentation, because I think it would be great for everyone to see the variety of schemes available and again, just get their heads around how those operate, some of the finances involved and the feasibility involved. I think then we could go on to hold a workshop to, I suppose, almost as a precursor to a SPI decision to kind of thrash these ideas around and figure out what's viable. At which point then I could put together an updated report with the sort of lessons learned and some of the member input and the cycle group input, and then bring it back to committee at a date to be decided. So as I see it, those are the two options really, which is, I suppose three options, which would be to proceed as is and bring the findings of the procurement back to the committee for noting, to, instead of a procurement, option two, or the second alternative would be to conduct soft market testing and then feed that back to committee at a later date. And the third option would be more hands-on committee involvement, bringing in suppliers for a member presentation, a follow-up workshop, including feedback from the cycle groups, and then presenting an option back to committee. So I think those are the three alternatives sort of on the bench at the moment. I'll leave it to the chairman.
Thank you very much, Alex. Okay, members, I think we've kind of heard everything on this now. I think we really need to try and draw this to a close, whichever way. I have got Councillor Garden to speak next.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I would like to bring it to a close. I mean, Councillor Clark's recommendation was to take option 3 forward, and if Councillor Clark would allow an amendment to that, that the officer goes out to potential providers. We have a workshop in early, mid-August at the latest, and then we have yellow papers being presented with a costing to this committee no later than the October meeting. If we set this timeline, then we can get something done quickly, effectively. So the purpose of the August workshop is we want to see ambitious ideas. The purpose of the yellow papers in October would be then we decide on which scheme we're going with.
Okay, can I be perfectly...
Would Councillor Clark accept that amendment?
Oh, sorry. Sorry, I don't know if you heard me, but so I don't think, I think we can combine elements of the two options that the officer had mentioned. I think it's going to be helpful for anyone that we engage with to tell them at this point that we have an appetite for leisure and commuting, because otherwise we're going to be making that decision in October and everything's going to be falling apart when we're not all on the same song sheet. I think that we should indicate that this option 3 at this level, at this point in the process, is something that members have appetite for. I do think we need to add the other park and ride, because I think if we don't have it there, we're never going to get it added in the future. And I think that officers need to go to the market, give them an indication of where we are at this stage, because some operators may not be willing to come to give the presentations if they think, well, this isn't actually, you know, this isn't our core business. We're not interested in this type of offering. And then the time-wise is perfect. If we go with August, have some information coming back to us, we set up the workshops, and we make the decision in October, that sounds quite succinct. If the officer is happy with that approach.
Yes, that would work.
Thank you very much, Alex. I have Brian O'Connell indicating to speak.
I've been through this process with committees a few times over the years, and I think we need to be clear that with a procurement process, the bit where we all have input, officers and members, is in defining the framework within which you go out to tender. Once you've gone out to tender, there isn't really a decision to be made, because the procurement framework itself essentially calculates who wins. So you weight it based on price, you weight it based on quality, you weight it based on some other requirement that you have. But once you've done that, and once you've gone out, it comes back, the scoring tells you who wins. And I've been in situations before presenting to committee where they've asked for a procurement outcome to come in front of them, and you have to tell them that legally they can't change, they can't make a decision on what is in front of them. So I think what is really important at this point is that the committee is satisfied with the framework within which the procurement is being conducted. That's the key point. That's the bit where you have control. So asking the officer to go away and conduct any part of a procurement exercise and come back with those results and expecting to be able to make a decision, you won't be able to. You can be involved in the process in different ways, but you will not be able to change the outcome of that procurement. And all it will do is frustrate you. And I know that because I've done it several times before in presenting to committees with those outcomes. So I think it would be really good if we could avoid that situation and putting Alex in that situation. And instead, perhaps, to be honest, it sounds to me like some time needs to be bought in order to get more information and more options clearly laid out for this committee so you can decide what you want in that procurement framework. It may still be able to be done in a fairly speedy, for procurement, in procurement terms, timetable. It may still be able to hit October dates. It may still be able to do those things. But I think unless, and I'm speaking for Alex here, but unless he gets an opportunity to go away and do the work on that and come back with it, we won't be certain. I'm just a little concerned that the committee might be making a decision with the sand sort of shifting under its feet at the moment and expecting something to come back to them that they can then deal with, and you won't be able to because of the way that procurement processes are set out in law. Thank you.
Okay, Russell, would you like to speak?
I'll keep it brief. Going along with what Ryan has said, I mean, if we're looking at option 3, as you pointed out, perhaps the idea is to maybe take out the word procure at the beginning of the thing, so that you're actually, I think what he's saying, well, I think what this committee is saying is that we don't want procurement done. What we want to do is we want options brought back, which involves both leisure and commuter demographics. And then I think we've also said that we don't want them limited to these 5 sites, plus the additional park and ride. We want more options, which isn't, to be quite honest, none of this is actually an option on the paper. So I think that's what Ryan is saying.
Thank you.
Yes, I don't want to start the procurement process as part of this initiative, because I think we need to make a decision and then start the procurement process. So yes, if we can take out any references to the procurement at this stage, I think that would be helpful.
Okay, Brian, can I, Councillor Clark, sorry, can I just be clear that we've sort of amended your proposal again? I say we. It sounds like you're in a broad agreement. So can I just be totally clear on sort of what you are suggesting we do? Because I think there is sort of agreement around the room that we are to remove the word procure from the option, and it's essentially to come back with some options. Am I correct?
Yeah, I think we need to investigate options with operators as opposed to engage with them on a procurement basis. But I do think, my worry is that we're going to come along in October and there could be some members thinking, oh no, I was only thinking about commuting, I wasn't thinking about leisure. I think there is a decision that we need to make tonight, and I think we've got enough information here just to start that process going on that wider context rather than nailing this down to leisure or commuting specifically.
Thank you very much. I think that's clearer. We really do need to try and draw this to a close. I've got 3 people who have indicated to speak now. So next I've got Patrick Garton, and then Claudine Russell, and then I believe Val Springett. If we can try and keep our comments fairly brief now, please, folks.
Yeah, just to put a very concise point on it, we're going with option 3, as in we're dealing with both leisure and commuting. We are inviting potential operators for a workshop in August, and then the procurement process starts subsequent to that workshop, when a decision on procurement will be made in October. I think if we put this deadline in, I think we should probably all be in agreement.
There seems to be some nodding agreement. I'll allow the other speakers to come in very quickly, and then we will just very briefly tidy that up and move on, because I think we are getting somewhere. Councillor Russell.
Seems like we just need option 3, but define the scope of what we're actually talking about, and make sure that it includes leisure and commercial. And just a suggestion that could the officer maybe also ask some other councils, because it can't be the only council in the whole world that's ever thought of a scheme like this, so there must be some costing and some other ideas of how that works and if it's working, and what they, we don't need to fall down the same pitfalls, maybe some other.
Yep.
Councillor. That's it from me.
Thank you very much, Councillor Russell. And
can I just
of course.
be absolutely certain that when we suggest the sites as part of leisure, and of course that's suggested, we're not sort of nailing down into any sort of contractual agreement. We list these sites and the fact that we own the alternatives, because it's going to change the way an operator looks at it if they have to engage with KCC as opposed to MBC. So I think this table is useful, but very specifically, this table is useful if we add the other park and ride site.
Thank you very much. And the last person to speak is, penultimate person to speak is Russell. Russell, please, and then Councillor Springett.
Sorry, just to clarify, with regards to what's being proposed, I think it was to investigate options of an operator-run a micromobility hire scheme encompassing both leisure and commuter demographics. 2 was Councillor Garton's point about having a workshop in August. 3, it was the October point. I didn't quite like having to put in the concept of procurement in there, if they come back with options which include procurement, might be better, as opposed to actually maybe committing to a procurement exercise at that point? Because that might be part of the options that are put forward by the officers. Sorry?
Once we heard the options at the workshop, procurement process can start. Saying to the, if we have potential, say we have 3 potential operators coming to the workshop in August, and we say, oh yeah, your plans sound really good, now give us the costings for it. So that is the moment when we send those potential operators back to do their costings, and the procurement process starts then when they're putting their bids in.
So I think my point was to simply leaving that option to the officers, because we don't know what's going to come out of that workshop. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So as opposed to coming back with particular procurement options, that might be one of the options which the officer is in a position to be able to come back with. But to actually turn around now and say, we want procurement options in October, might be you might be tying your own hands. So I'm just suggesting, yes, come back in October with options. But without putting the word procurement in it.
Thank you very much. I think that's made things much clearer. The last person to speak, I am sure that we have run through this now, is Councillor Springett.
Actually, Mr. Russell came out with exactly what I was going to say, is take the word procurement out of it, because that seemed to be the stumbling block. So that's all I was going to say. So I'm happy with the suggestions just been made.
Okay. The wording I have in front of me, which is slightly amended, so Councillor Clark, if you agree with the sentiments, then if you disagree, please tell me, is that the item be deferred to allow potential scheme providers to be invited to a workshop in August as part of a soft marketing testing, with the procurement process to be started after that point for agreement to be sought in October 2021. No.
Should we not just say that options to be presented to this committee in October rather than the procurement?
Right. So that the item be deferred to allow potential scheme providers to be invited to a workshop in August as part of a soft marketing testing, with the scheme providers... sorry, can you repeat that last bit? I thought I remembered it.
Well, basically, we would be presented with options in October.
Well, yeah, so with the committee being presented with options in October.
A report detailing options in October.
Okay, that's perfect. And I can't remember, I think it was Councillor Springett who first seconded it. Are you happy with that?
And I think there's a small note that needs to be added that before that workshop, we need to indicate to operators that this committee has an appetite for leisure and commuter, for encompassing both leisure and commuter demographics. And our suggested sites are, and I think you need to include that table and include the park and ride. Okay. Because I think we should be very clear what we're going to them before they come to us with the briefing.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, please, Russell.
Right. To investigate options of an operator to run a micro-mobility hire scheme encompassing both leisure and commuter demographics, to include the sites identified in paragraph 3.35 of the report, but not be limited to it, to then present a workshop, to do a soft marketing exercise and present a workshop in August, to come back to this committee with a report with options. Obviously, we've got to check with Alex.
Alex, if you'd like to come back on that, and I think we may have...
I think that's absolutely fine, but I would just like to say you listed the table, but not limited to, but I do think you should mention the other park and ride, just so we've got it listed there.
Okay, I think we have got there. Alex, if you would like to come back on that, and I will allow you the last word.
I'd agree with that wording. Happy to add in the other park and ride site. And again, the only thing I was really going to add is the fact that what we can also do, that this doesn't need to be included in the wording, but really just, I think, to tidy up what a few other people have said, is that we're perfectly within our within our rights to just say, here are our proposed sites, but obviously if suppliers have any additional sites or anywhere that they've identified, that we'd like to see all of those submissions as well. So really, all we want to say is that here are our guidelines, or here's what's essential, but we want to see you expand beyond that. So yeah, we can certainly do that. But yeah, aside from that, happy with the recommendation, happy with the wording, and again, happy to include London Road Park and Ride site as well.
Thank you very much, Alex. Therefore, we have a recommendation on the table which is proposed now by Councillor Clark and seconded by Councillor Springett. Are we all in agreement? I believe that is unanimous. Is anyone opposed? No, unanimous. Thank you very much, members. We got there in the end. Now I move on to item number 18, which is the cycle parking infrastructure. Okay, and this report is going to be introduced by James Lehane. Thank you for waiting patiently, James.
Thank you. Good evening, all. This report is in regard to options for investment in cycle parking throughout the district. It is specifically regarding a pot of business rates retention funding, £54,000 that's previously been earmarked for spend on cycle infrastructure. The recommendations that are set out in the report were informed first by an audit that was carried out by Sustrans approximately a year ago, just a bit over that. These recommendations were then discussed with members in a pair of workshops and a number of direct conversations. There was then a prioritisation procedure applied to these proposals to draw out the supported options which could be most reliably and most rapidly delivered, and also to remove those from the list which may be delivered through other means. I'll come back onto that one in a moment. As such, the particular prioritisation applied to those measures that were preferred led us with the prioritisation as set out in section 2.6. That is first and foremost going for local and village centres together with areas in the Maidstone urban area. This is particularly around shopping access is the main purpose of these. You can see the specific list in Appendix 3. One thing that I would point out is please do refer to Appendix 3 for the actual definitive list. There are some recommendations that are left off of the list under Section 2.6, specifically those for Lenham. Priority 2, I should say, with the first, with the local and village centres, part of why that is at the highest priority is because the delivery partner involved in that. In some locations it may simply be NBC land, others is Kent County Council land, and minimises the number of partners necessary. Second priority would be delivery of a cycle hub at Maidstone Hospital. Again, the delivery partner here will be the NHS, and this is something we've actually had discussions with the NHS about over a number of years. It's been identified as a need, particularly for the staff there, but also for visitors. The third priority would be the transport hubs, and this is where the selection of certain hubs has come in based on Section 106 or SIL monies being available, because there are obviously a number of agreements in process where there's been money secured for improvements at these stations, and we're obviously not wanting to overlap on that and spend business rates retention money where 106 has already been earmarked for it. The priority for what to include at the hubs went down to cycle lockers and adapted cycle parking for adapted bikes for disabled cyclists. There was also a very clear interest from members in pursuing improved CCTV at these stations. The discussion that followed onto that that has led to them not being involved in this was on a few factors. One of those being that the CCTV took up over half of the budget available without much of a long-term coverage of maintenance. The second has been further discussions around the planning department about how these sorts of improvements could be better pursued with the rail stations, with the rail operators, and something that we look at under Section 106 is where there are developments linking into these stations. As I say, please note Appendix 3 for the specific full list of what's provided, and there's costing breakdown given there with an assumption of 20% of the budget going to maintenance. So the available options that we've got in front of us, the first option is spending the money as recommended in Appendix 3. The second option is to not spend these monies on cycle parking infrastructure whatsoever. And third option would be to spend the money on cycle infrastructure, but with a different prioritisation to those that are set out in this paper. One other thing to pick out at this point that I haven't touched on yet, in terms of what is and isn't recommended. Members indicated an interest in and a concern around provision of cycle parking at education facilities. That is not something covered in the report. Now, the reasoning that Sustrans did not include that in their report initially is because the brief they were given was looking at their recommendations for Maidstone Borough Council on that spend, and school cycle parking is something that is overseen by Kent County Council through a number of different schemes, but principally the school travel plan scheme. It doesn't necessarily mean that there is perfect infrastructure at all educational facilities. However, it's recommended that that would be for the county council at this point. Moving forward, it's proposed that should option 1 be selected and we move ahead, the immediate next stage is engagement with the delivery partners that I mentioned. We'll be confirming the exact positioning that we'll be going with and engaging with them in the procurement exercise. As such, the next SPI committee, should we go with option 1 today, it's perfectly feasible for us to come back here at that point with an update on how that procurement is going, how those discussions are going, and hopefully an indicative timescale for delivery. Any questions?
Thank you very much. I invite any visiting members who wish to speak on this matter, if they would be able to make their points quite succinctly. Councillor Harper, you are indicating to speak.
Apologies.
Thank you for inviting me to speak. This will be my last appearance before you tonight on cycling again. I think this is quite, again, having spoken with colleagues on the Cycle Campaign Forum, we welcome this report. We think this is a good step forward with some immediate action being proposed. And I think most of us here were on those seminars about a month ago when we were discussing this. A couple of ideas I had, and perhaps it might be something which could be taken forward in addition to this report for future review, as Section 106 and SIL monies become available in the future. But it strikes me there's a number of sort of key employment sites and so on where we may look longer term to try to have cycle hubs or cycle lockers. And I'm thinking, the first one what comes to mind is the Innovation Centre, which the council's put in tens of millions of pounds to build, and that would be a good location with the Kim site there for secure cycle parking facilities at some stage. Lock Meadow, it's been referred to in the previous report. It's a logical cycle hub as a big leisure and entertainment complex, so again that could perhaps be looked at in the future. And obviously the Parkwood Trading Estate. Obviously the money's not there in this proposal to do that, but as I say, if we have an open mind in terms of SIL and Section 106, we may be able to look at those types of locations in the future. I suppose I have a slight concern in terms of the Sheffield stands for the town centre as a cyclist myself. I wouldn't want to lock my bike up for any period of time on one of those in the town centre. The level of cycle theft there tends to be. Even coming to a meeting like tonight, I mean, I would choose to walk here rather than bring my bike, unless I brought my bike and left it downstairs, because I wouldn't want to really leave it tied up, just outside in Jubilee Square for 3 or 4 hours and go back to find, I'm sure, parts of the bike potentially nicked. So Sheffield stands are useful for sort of quick grab-and-go type visits, so to your local convenience store, but they're not really a solution where you're going to leave something for a considerable time. And then just finally, in terms of the cycle hangers in residential areas in the more urban parts of town, I wonder whether perhaps with local ward members, and I know, for instance, in Fant we would be interested, we could do a bit of consultation with residents, because the big concern which I raised at the workshop was where you've got very densely built up areas, very difficult problems with on-street parking now. If we removed some on-street parking for cycled lockers, there's a potential of, setting off one set of neighbours against another, and it already happens with car parking as it is. But if we did some consultation in a number of pilot areas to actually see what the public appetite was, because at the end of the day, it's the people who live in those streets who would have to be the ones, if you like, as a community, to give up space for cycle hangers. So I would, like to work with the committee, perhaps investigating in, say, the inner part of Fant, whether that may be a possibility, just to get the feedback from residents, because without that, the feedback from residents, we don't really know whether it, the problems, if you like, more in our perception, or whether it's the actual concerns of residents in those areas. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Harper. Are there any other visiting members who wish to speak on this item? I don't believe there are. Okay, I have a number of people wishing to speak. First I have Councillor Mumford, and then I have Councillor Russell, then Councillor Springett, then Councillor Garton. Councillor Mumford, please.
This is my dying attempt. When I first got to the council, I was on a scrutiny committee with Val Springett, and what I'm just about to describe was part of the cycling and walking policy. I believe we should be looking at this as essential and leisure. Essential to me is work, onward travel and shopping. I represent 2 rural villages with limited shops, really limited shops, no doctors, etc. An appalling bus service. There is a trial going on, but at the moment we've got 3 buses a day, and make sure you get the right one at 1 o'clock, otherwise you can get them back to the village. An appalling bus service. Now, if you look at page 37, it's described on there, cycle parking should be provided at bus stops. So if I take my situation, just my situation, I'm sure there's many like it, I've got the B2163 going along past those 2 villages. At the end, I've got the A229 at Linton Corner, and I've got the A274. Both a short cycle distance away. 3 buses a day, no Sunday service. But if I could get out to those 2 roads, I then get buses to Tenterden, I get Sunday service, I get the frequent bus service, and people moan about it, but I'd love Staplehurst bus service, I would love Headcorns bus service. So if you provide me with cycle parking at Plough Wentz and Linton Corner, then I would be able to get out of the village, and it would not be a sort of what I call a hostage location. I know we've got limited funds. I know that there should be priorities, but if we look at page 38, the person sat next to me is going to go mad, but I see Lewes Village near the Checkers Inn. Well, all that's down there is a pub and a nice stream to walk through. Along the Lewes Green Way, I'm suggesting that we should have a priority, and that priority should start with essential: work, onward travel, shopping. And then we come to leisure. I would say with the limited budget that we might not be able to do it tonight, but I'm never going to give up, so don't think that I'm going to keep quiet. I believe that it is an opportunity. I know it went in the cycling and walking policy that rural villages be provided parking at the nearest bus stops to them so they can get out on the bus and not be held hostage in their villages. I just use my situation as an example, and also the two at the bottom of the Sheffield stands to me are leisure, and we should have a priority of the essential, which is work, onward travel, shopping.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mumford. Mr. Jarman.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. To be straightforward about this, there's £54,000 maximum available. As James said, 20% of that will go towards installation fees, maintenance. But on top of that as well, you know, it's a matter of talking to various landowners. As James said, the reason why we've gone for Sheffield stands in local centres, village centres, and the town centre, but if it's seen as too high a sort of crime risk to have Sheffield stands in the town centre, then fair enough. Although sometimes I go to Earl Street, and it'd be quite nice to, you know, be able to park your bike. I'd still be able to see my bike if I was having a drink or eating food in Earl Street. So it's all about time and cost. To get back to Councillor Munford's point, you know, if anybody's proposing new houses, new employment, then there's two things, and I've heard debates about this in this very room over the years. First of all, we require cycle parking, as we do for car parking. That's part and parcel of a planning application. And secondly, if there's some big drive, excuse the pun, to get Section 106 monies for, I don't know, cycle parking, quite frankly, anywhere, be it bus stops in Bolton and Chelsea, then we can do that on the back of a Section 106. Or as Councillor Harper said, there's a growing pot, or pots I should say, plural, of SIL monies. And, sorry, going back to Councillor Harper's point, yeah, I think it's a good idea to have further discussions with residents. We're not against cycle hangers, but we realise that there's further work to be done. But there is what's called a local community SIL, so a bid can be made for cycle hangers wherever in the borough. Thank you. I'm just conscious of time and money. Yes, it is a straightforward prioritisation, but I very much think we need to get on with this. Thank you.
Mr. Lehane.
Yeah, just to add quickly onto Rob's point there, the comments that were raised in the workshop, Councillor Mumford, by yourself actually, on this topic were noted and very much agreed with actually. But the reasoning that went into this specific list of priorities is because these are all measures that we can essentially crack on with immediately. What we wanted to avoid was essentially coming back to say we need to keep talking, we need to come back at the next committee with another revision on this. That said, an alternative potential option that would be quite different to this and take longer to work up, I have to be honest about it, would possibly be to quite significantly reduce down the number of lockers and stands that we are considering, and instead have more of a trial scheme involving lockers that would be put in certain locations, and if they were used and they were desired, they could be moved on and shifted around. But there would be project management costs in there. There would be, it would take longer to work up, and we would need a larger budget, significantly, if we were wanting to go in with something on the ground that provided parking at all of the locations around the district, similarly cut off to the area that you describe, Councillor Mumford. So, yeah, essentially, we could quite significantly change the process here, but the recommendation is more around what we can deliver quite rapidly.
Okay, thank you very much for making that clear. Next to speak, I've got Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Chair. I used some time wisely today to have a look at the Section 106 for Marden, and there is actually a Section 106 from the parsonage development that is just shy of £20,000, and it is specifically for cycle parking at the station. Whilst I know that's with a delivery partner, it doesn't seem to be factored in, or I'm not entirely sure if that is their part of the 54,000 that's mentioned. But I suppose I'd just like to know how that is going to be factored in and used, because that is has a spend by date of July 2022.
Mr. Jarman, do you want to come in on this?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, as you said, Councillor, this is purely about the maximum of £54,000. As separate issues, as you quite rightly said, there's quite a lot of Section 106 monies, not just from the parsonage, but other developments in Marden for improvements to the station, which obviously includes cycle parking. That's the same for Yalding. That's the same for Staplehurst. So we've deprioritised those because, if you like, the money's already in the bank, so to speak.
So will that be spent by July 2022?
I can't commit to an actual time frame because, as you alluded to, that means further detailed discussions with South East and potentially Network Rail, but particularly South East. I have discussed Marden and Staplehurst train stations, but we need to have further discussions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And next to speak is Councillor Springett.
Thank you. I think it's a really good report, and actually I think we should just go ahead with this, but I would suggest perhaps, could we put I'm disappointed we can't have CCTV, but I get the cost, but is there any reason we couldn't put signs up everywhere that says these racks are under regular surveillance? Like the fly tipping one with the eagle on, that the eagle eye is watching you. I don't know if they'll make any difference, but could that be considered? That's one question. And then perhaps if we had a fourth recommendation at the end of that says officers investigate available Section 106 monies available to expand the scheme in outlying areas or whatever. So in other words, we go for this because I think it's great, it's ready to go, and I think we all want this, but let's not stop. We want to carry on. So I wonder if we could actually add a point 4 onto that.
Can I just, and I note that, and I suspect it will get unanimous support around this table. Can I just let Rob Jarman come in, and then I will, you're actually, you're on my list to speak anyway, Councillor Clark, so don't worry.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, absolutely no problem with the Section 106 reference, and that's something that myself and James are doing. CCTV, yeah, it'd be great, and apart from stating the obvious, we've only got £54,000, and Mr. O'Connell will remember this. What we've factored in is the unit cost, and be it Network Rail, the main money and the responsibility is, it's one thing putting up a camera, it's another thing maintaining it, and it's another thing enforcing it as well. And at the end of the day, it's their own private property. I mean, we can have discussions with them about sort of false CCTV, but mock CCTV. But I think that's better, that discussion, under the Section 106 discussions that we'll be having, or continuing to have. Thank you.
Could I just very quickly come back? So when we're putting lockers in at stations, I presume we'll have the discussion with them of, have they got CCTV that covers their car park, and can we put our lockers so they're covered?
Thank you very much. Just to recap, there is a fourth recommendation that's proposed by Councillor Springett and seconded by Councillor Clark, which is, obviously, we take what's on the report for the recommendations on the report, and then on top of that, we investigate how Section 106 monies can be spent to expand that scheme. Okay. I'm going to come to Councillor Garton, and then to Councillor Clark, and then to Councillor Grigg.
I just want to thank the officer for an excellent report and very speedy action. We were at this workshop only, 6 weeks ago, if that. So it is really good, speedy, expeditious work to bring this information forward to this committee. On the CCTV, yes, this report referred to the CCTV, and it was actually me who was the driving force not to pursue the CCTV, mainly because of the cost, the value for money on the CCTV. We could put, I think, 2 lockable cycle lockers at the railway station for the cost of a CCTV camera. And I was using the example of my own railway station of Hollingbourne, where Network Rail has operative working CCTV in place, and it would really be just a matter of talking to the rail operator whether they could possibly jiggle the angle of their camera, or whether it would actually need to have a jiggling of the camera. So that would be very good to have that. But yeah, just for the public who may be watching tonight to this meeting, we did consider CCTV, and it was a lot of members who felt like me that CCTV is a measure once the horse is bolted. We want to secure those bikes, and bicycles are very expensive. And cycle lockers, and I've seen 2 are being proposed for Hollingbourne, which is a very remote station, is far more effective than CCTV. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Garson. Next, I've got Councillor Clark and then Councillor Grigg.
Thanks, Chairman. Yes, so in seconding, there's one extra point, and that really picks up on Councillor Mumford's point on really the sustainability at Walton, Chelsea, Linton. If we do consider secure parking at Plough-Wentz Road or at Linton Crossroads, it will make Walton, Chelsea, Chart Sutton, Langley more sustainable, because there will be people that will be willing to cycle relatively short distance from their village to a point where they are then in a real thoroughfare in terms of public transport. And that really would make a difference to them. So I think that we should pick up on that. I know there was mention of the 3 stands in Lewes and the Greenway, but we are only talking £225 for all of those 3 at £75 a pop. So I just wonder, we've got on the work programme, and we talked about the spatial policy, non-spatial policies, and I just wonder if we can just add a note that as part of that, we should be looking out for these creative, sustainable options for villages like Walton-on-Chelsea in planning, so that we can bring those into the agreements with the developer contribution.
Thank you very much. And I'm not quite sure how we can work that in as a recommendation, because it's essential. I think what you're asking for is that we have a policy going forwards.
We can make a recommendation to the author of that item on the work programme that they consider that specific point around sustainability and bike storage.
Yep. Are you happy for your proposal to be amended? Yeah. Thank you very much, Councillor Springett, and that makes sense. And then I think we've got there now. So, Councillor Grigg, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I also agree this is an excellent report, so let's just get on with it. I mean, one small point for the 3 stands in Lewes. Anyone who knows Lewes Village knows that the Chequers is actually at the bottom of a valley, and unless you're a cyclist of Olympic standard, you won't get up either side of the hill. But there are bus stops at the top of both hills, so it may be suggested, may I suggest that they be reinstated there rather than at the Chequers, where there is nowhere to put them anyway.
Thank you very much. Okay, so in addition to the recommendations, which are on, apologies, I can't see which page of the agenda, but the recommendations for agenda item number 18, there's a fourth recommendation, which is that we investigate how Section 106 monies can be used to expand the scheme, and then a fifth recommendation that we explore, that we ask the author to, add to the work programme to explore how we can look at creative ways of expanding this in the future. And is that correct?
Add it to non-spatial policy, the author of the non-spatial
yeah,
policy.
Sorry, yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. Are we all agree? Mr. Fitzpatrick.
It's just a clarification. The officer has indicated that there was a couple of omissions from the list that was put at Appendix 3. So if we could just say, sorry, at Item 3. So if Item 3 just read that schemes are prioritised and delivered in partnership with the relevant organisation, landowners, as detailed in Appendix 3, I think that'll cover the lot. And then we just delete all those bullet points. Would be far more easier than trying to amend to include Lenham.
So. Okay, thank you. I think that is on the record. Is everyone agreed? Does anyone disagree? Then that is unanimous. Thank you very much, members. Next, we move on to item number 19 on the agenda, which is Lenham Neighbourhood Plan Regulation 19, which is pages 40 to 48 in your agenda pack. This report is going to be introduced by Anna Ironmonger. So, Anna, if you wish to speak, please.
Hi, good evening, Chair, and good evening, members. So this report is about the Lenham Neighbourhood Plan, which has reached the final stage of the neighbourhood planning process. The neighbourhood plan was subject to referendum on the 6th of May, and the referendum was successful with 92% voting in favour of the neighbourhood plan. When more than half of those who vote in favour of a neighbourhood plan, the plan must be made, which is the process of formal adoption, by full council within 8 weeks. Under normal circumstances, the timetable for referendum, including consideration by this committee and full council, is planned to ensure statutory timescales are met. As discussed in the report, the statutory duty will not be met owing to delays because of the coronavirus pandemic. The delays are considered to be acceptable. Following the successful referendum, the Lenham Neighbourhood Plan is now part of the development plan for the Maidstone Borough. This committee is asked this evening to note the result of the referendum and, in accordance with the agreed neighbourhood planning protocol, make a recommendation to full council that the Lenham Neighbourhood Plan is made. Thank you and welcome any questions.
Thank you very much. I'm fairly sure that Councillor Sams, as a visiting member, would wish to speak first on this matter. So, Councillor Sams, please.
Thank you very much, members. I just wanted to say, just for the record, really, of the fantastic amount of work, effort, time over years that the neighbourhood plan group and in Lenham and the parish council have done, and to get a referendum with 92% in favour, I think is absolutely brilliant with the situation that we're in. And I'd just like to give my thanks to them and the officers working with them. So thank you very much, members.
Thank you very much, Councillor Sams. Does anyone else wish to speak on this matter? I'll take that as a no. In that case, there are 2 recommendations to be made. The recommendations are that the result of the referendum held on 6th of May 2021 on the Lenham Neighbourhood Plan be noted. Is that noted? That's noted. And the second on here is that Council be recommended to make the Lenham Neighbourhood Plan. Are we all in agreement? We're all in agreement. Does anyone disagree? No. Thank you very much. That's unanimous. Next on the agenda, we have item number 20, which is the Walton Monchelsea Neighbourhood Plan, which is which is pages 49 to 57 in your agenda pack. Again, this report will be introduced by Anna Ironmonger. Anna, if you wish to speak, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, exactly the same as the Lenham Neighbourhood Plan, the Walton Monchelsea Neighbourhood Plan has reached the final stage of the neighbourhood planning process. It was subject to a referendum as well on the 6th of May, and that referendum was also successful with 89% voting in favour of the neighbourhood plan. Again, this evening, committee are asked to note the result of the referendum and, in accordance with the agreed neighbourhood planning protocol, make a recommendation to full council that the Walton Munchelsea neighbourhood plan is made. Thank you.
Fabulous, thank you very much. Councillor Mumford, I suspect you wish to speak first. You have the floor.
End of a long journey. I'd like to thank everyone being involved, including the officers. 12 years, I've got 15 members on the parish council. I think there's been 45 have actually inputted to it in the time that we've been doing it. So I'd like to say thank you to the Neighbourhood Plan Group in Walton and Chelsea and propose this as per the officers' recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Was that you? I think we have two seconders. So you, I think Brian, Councillor Clark seconded it, so you can third it, Councillor Mackay. I don't get the impression that anyone else wishes to speak on this matter. Therefore, the report is, first and foremost, is that report noted? Thank you very much. And then secondly, we have a proposer and seconder that council be recommended to make the Baltimore-Chelsea neighbourhood plan. Are we all in agreement? Any dissent? No, thank you. That is agreed. Thank you very much, members. We now move on to item number 21 on the agenda, which is the consultation on the Tumbridge Wells Borough Council pre-submission Regulation 19 plan, which is on pages 58 to 69 of your agenda packs. This report is going to be introduced by Helen Garnett, who is joining us on the webcast. Helen, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Chair. So this report provides the details of the Regulation 19 consultation on the Tumbridge Wells local plan. Regulation 19 is the final consultation on the local plan before it's submitted for examination, and at this stage comments are limited to those relating to matters of legal compliance and soundness. So the plan consultation has been accompanied by a range of supporting evidence documents, and it's also been tested against the habitat regulations. The report and the attached response notes and welcomes the fact that Tunbridge Wells are seeking to meet its increased housing need as set out by the government standard methodology, and this includes a buffer of circa 1,000 dwellings. For members' benefit, the report outlines the strategy for Tunbridge Wells local plan, which sees delivery of its housing needs through a dispersed growth approach with two strategic sites, one at Paddock Wood, Capel, and one at Chudley Village. It should be noted that the strategic location at Paddock Wood is sited on the boundary with Maidstone Borough. The strategic site at Paddock Wood is also located partly within the flood zone, and this is dealt with through the strategic flood risk assessment. MBC has requested that development in this location should not adversely affect parts of Maidstone that lie downstream of the Paddock Wood strategic site. In terms of landscape and green belt, it should be noted that Tunbridge Wells has reviewed its green belt as both its strategic sites are located in or partly within it. For air quality and transport, the plan seeks to include mitigation to reduce its impact on roads in Tunbridge Wells and the wider area, including Maidstone Borough. And the draft plan includes improvements to, or will lead to improvements to junctions on the A228 and the B2160. MBC has requested that as part of the Paddock Wood master planning process, consideration is given to opportunities to deliver joined up and cohesive active travel and public transport. And finally, just to note that the deadline for responses was the 4th of June, and officer level comments have been submitted in advance of that date, on the understanding with Tunbridge Wells that any member level comments can be submitted as an update to that response. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. No visiting members have indicated they wish to speak on this, so to speak I have Councillor Grigg, please.
Just something very small. On the first page of the letter, which is on page 66, under housing, there is the last two lines. It actually says, we note that TWBC is seeking meet its gypsy. Is that seeking MBC to meet, or is it seeking they're seeking to meet? It's quite quite an important omission, so I think if we could just clarify that and also add it to the letter.
Helen, if you're able.
Yeah, apologies for that. Yes, so they're seeking to meet their need, so I will clarify that in the letter.
Thank you very much. Nobody else, I believe, has indicated to speak. Councillor Garton.
Just a very brief point, Mr. Chairman. We missed the other authorities' deadline to comment, which just points out how ineffective our committee system is at this council.
Thank you very much, Councillor Garton, and your point is noted, but it isn't strictly in keeping with what we are discussing here at committee, but it is certainly noted by me. Thank you. Apologies, the report has two recommendations. The first is that members note the current consultation on the Tumbridge Wells Borough Council draft local plan. Is that noted, members? And the second is that members resolve to agree the officer level response to this consultation at Appendix 1 of this report. Members, is that agreed? Apologies, with the amendment that has just been discussed. Do we all agree? Anybody disagree? No. Thank you very much. We now move on to the last item on the agenda. Thank you very much, members, which is item number 22, which is the local plan review update, which is pages 70 to 72 of your agenda packs. And this report will be introduced by Mark Edgett. I was looking at, I knew you were here. I'm so sorry. You have your moment, Mr. Edgerton.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm very pleased to inform the committee that significant progress has been made on the local plan review Regulation 19 draft for submission documents, and this includes a series of studies and topic papers that will form part of the wider evidence base for the local plan review documents themselves. Now, in particular, I want to draw members' attention to a few main points. The first one is that we've had a significant number of responses, which has been noted before, and they relate to a variety of key areas within the local plan review. They integrate with a number of areas of evidence base and also quite a breadth of matters in respect of the documents themselves. Plan-wide studies, such as the viability testing and sustainability appraisal, have also been undertaken. They're progressing well, but there's a small amount of additional work to do there. With regard to the garden community proposals, these are major, multifaceted, complex schemes, and they will help inform, a little bit of extra time here would help inform and to allow us to justify the proposals themselves. We also want to be in a position where we can brief members prior to their formal consideration of the Regulation 19 proposals. There's also been recent changes to government policy, and I think many of us are aware of this. Recently, first homes, we mentioned this in the committee, and also in respect of things like employment and retail, and the changes to the government's use classes order as well, and these will have implications on the local plan review. The other thing to say is that Regulation 19 is a formal stage. The tests around the soundness and legal compliance, we've heard this from Helen Garnett as well in the last report. So this is a very important step for Maidstone to take, and in light of the above, officers would like members to consider a short delay to the publication of the Regulation 19 documents, which are currently scheduled actually to be published this month, in order to reduce the likelihood of further consultation being needed prior to submission of the documents and associated evidence base. So officers intend to bring a revised local development scheme incorporating a revised timetable for the local plan review to the 6th of July 2021 meeting of this committee. We also will place a note on the Council's website letting people know that the local plan review timetable is under review and that a revised local development scheme will be taken to this committee for consideration. That's it for me. It's just a reminder that this report is for noting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First, we have visiting members. I understand that Councillor Sams, who is visiting on the webcast, wishes to speak. Apologies, I may have got that.
Sorry, members.
No,
I am here. No, I didn't wish to speak. I just reserved my right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Apologies for that. Councillor Grigg, is that a legacy? You do wish to speak? Yes, Councillor Grigg first, please.
Thank you. Well, I have to sort of agree with Councillor Mackay this evening. For the second time tonight, we've seen the word delay, which we haven't seen before, on this issue, and I went through this introduction and background on this, and actually as I went through the paragraphs 1.3, there's nothing new in there that we didn't know. 1.4, we knew about the viability assessment, the sustainability appraisal. 1.5, we knew about the government changes. So there's nothing in here that is explaining to me what's new, why this delay is suddenly, it's the first time. We knew we were on a really tight schedule with this. We have fought 4 or 5 meetings a week in order to keep it to June, and I don't quite understand from reading this what's happened between our last meeting and this, why we're suddenly now looking at a short delay, and I would also like clarification on what that short delay is. I know obviously you're saying coming back here 6th to the 14th, but in reality when are we looking at regulation? Because as I said earlier, this is the first pushback on the local plan that we've seen since we started the review.
Mr. Edgerton.
Thank you very much. Yes, the changes themselves have occurred over recent months. We've been formulating the documents, we've been formulating the evidence base, and been making, as I said at the beginning of the report, very good progress. And you know, we have been undertaking an awful lot of work, concerted effort to take this matter forward. And you know, I think it is only wise that we advise members that a short delay would be appropriate in light of the circumstances that have been set out, in light of the circumstances that have become apparent to officers since the last update. In terms of what a short delay is, well, I'm not going to be drawn completely on that yet. I think it's something which will be subject to the report itself when it's taken to the committee on the 6th of July. But I don't anticipate it to be in the region of several months. I expect it to be as short as we can possibly make it. It would be in the region of 2 or 3 months, that sort of thing. But again, it would be for the committee to consider in light of the information contained in that report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Edgerton. I take on board what you say, but can I make a personal request that this is extremely important to the borough and that all effort is put into, including the meetings timetable that we've had, in order to keep that short delay as short as possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Grigg. Mr. Coyne.
Just to add to what Mark said, Chairman, to reassure the committee and Councillor Grigg, we will keep that delay as short as possible. The thing that we will prioritise in looking at that is to make sure that we absolutely minimise any exposure that there may be in terms of the existing plan expiring. So that will be something we'll be looking very closely at. We got slowed down by the number 3,500 responses to the Regulation 18B consultation. Obviously, it's really important that we go through all of those, make sure they're all taken on board and built into what we're doing. Government changes such as first homes that we've got to take on board, changes to the rules around retail and the used classes order. And we think that this very short delay now is better than, as Mark said, to go to Reg 19 and end up having to do that again, which could potentially give us with a significant period of exposure without a plan. But just to reassure members, we will be bringing this into as short a timescale as we can when we come back.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Coyne. Yes, I apologise, Councillor Perry. I understand that you wish to speak. I was, just after I allowed someone else to, I was informed you were waiting. I do apologise, Mr. Perry. Councillor Perry, you have the floor.
No, that's fine. Just 2 points, actually. This has been an extensive consultation to Regulation 18B. Is there likely to be any major significant changes to the preferred sites that we went out on for Regulation 18B? That's my first question. The second question I have is Gypsy and Traveller needs. I know there's a major exercise going on, and there will be a separate DBD for G&T, but nevertheless, could you update us a little bit on where we are with that and what effect that will have on the local plan? Thank you.
Mr. Edgerton.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm not going to be drawn at the moment on whether or not there's going to be changes to any sites. What we are entitled to do as a local planning authority, which will be given full consideration by this committee, is to take on board the latest evidence that we are in receipt of, and that's from all sources. So if we are in receipt of additional evidence and that warrants a change in circumstances, that will be something which is brought to members for their consideration. What I think I can assure everyone is that we will bring that evidence to the committee and they will be in a position to make decisions on the final spatial strategy in light of the most up-to-date evidence at that time. In respect to gypsies and travellers, where we're at is that we have an ongoing gypsy and traveller needs assessment. That assessment is indicating that we do have a significant need in this borough moving forward. It's a really quite significant issue. We haven't been able to complete that assessment in the main due to COVID-19 and the restrictions that have been in place and gaining access to undertake the surveys. What that actually means, therefore, is that we have proposed, and this is contained within the Regulation 18 Preferred Approaches document, for a gypsy and traveller development plan document, a new local plan, to take place on this specific matter. And that means that we'll be able to give full regard to this matter, especially given the sensitivity and its importance as well. So that will form part of the 18B proposals, and it is intended at this stage, subject to any future emerging evidence, to be forming part of the Regulation 19 document as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Yeah.
Councillor Sams has indicated to ask a question. Councillor Sams.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, we're talking about delay. I do find it slightly ironic that we were trying to, myself and Councillor Tom Sams were trying to extend the consultation, and we were told, oh no, there was no way that could happen because we had to stick to this tight timetable, which we're now suggesting we delay in 2 or 3 months. But my question really is about the third iteration of the Heathlands community garden proposal, and we were due to see that well before going into that consultation. So can I ask when we're going to see that? Thank you.
I think it's a very similar response as I've made to Councillor Perry. What we intend to do is to make sure that the full suite of evidence base that is going to support our local plan review in an updated format is presented to members of this committee so that they can give full consideration to that evidence base and the proposals which have resulted from it. What we're not proposing to do is to provide evidence in sort of draft form. We're not proposing to provide some evidence ahead of the committee's decision to consider it. So it will be done in the public domain. The full consideration will be given to it, and it will be done in the appropriate format and remit within this council. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next to speak, I have Councillor Clark.
Thank you. I think this really does, show the benefit of the decision to go out to 18B, because I just wonder what would have happened. There are many members that would have felt we should have went straight to Regulation 19, and then we wouldn't have had a chance for any of that consultation feedback to be reviewed by the council. We would have been at the whim of the government inspector at this point, and I really do think that we did the right thing to go out to Regulation 18B, and now we do have the ability as a council to consider the feedback that's come forward, and we have the ability to look at that. Now, I'm very concerned about this up to that point, I'm happy, but I'm very concerned about this delay. And I think the point that Councillor Sams made is very pertinent. Even though we went out to Regulation 18B, it was constrained and it was tight. We had a tiny extension over Christmas. But at that time, we were told everything had to focus on keeping the deadlines as tight as possible. Otherwise, we risk boosting the numbers for the new local plan review to the new government figures rather than the previously decided figures for the local plan review. And hearing this delay, which at the moment we don't have that much information on, obviously it's going to come back to this committee, it makes me feel that there must be a risk. And I wondered if you can just give us a bit more information about how we stand when we look at the risk that was given to members leading up to the new year, leading up to the end of last year, and where we stand now with those figures and the government's consultation.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Yeah, circumstances actually have changed in one fundamental respect, and that is that in the lead up to the Regulation 18B Preferred Approaches consultation, we were in a position as an authority where the government nationally had set out proposals to revise their algorithm for housing need. And for Maidstone, that was to put housing need up from the current figure, which is circa 1,200 units per year, to a figure that was nearer to 1,600 units per year. The decisions taken by the committee, the debates which were had by this committee back then, which resulted in the timetable that we are currently operating to, were made in case the government stuck to its guns and stuck to that sort of circa 1,600 figure for Maidstone, which would have resulted from that algorithm. The government haven't actually pursued that approach. The government have now reverted to its original algorithm, which gives us that figure of around 1,200 units per year. So that is a key difference to where we were back then when we were making the decisions with the accelerated timetable. So I think there's a second part to that point as well, which is around the risks. And I think what I would want to do as part of the report on the July committee is consider whether or not there were, so that members could consider the risks in their entirety, is consider not just the sort of the current risks of a slight delay here, but the knock-on effects as well. And I think this is probably what you're alluding to. It isn't just about the risk of going out in the autumn, for example, with a Regulation 19 consultation instead of the summer. This is about the risks of the longer term, isn't it? About having a plan in place and when we would actually get to adoption. And that's something which I think, although we're just here for a report that's for noting, I'd be very happy to provide some detail on in that report for July so that members can consider that as well.
Just to come back, I think, I do feel there's an element, call me a cynic, of bait and switch with this whole approach, because I think that we were really under the gun and then all of a sudden things have changed. And actually, again, coming back to my point, I think we really, really are in a much better position because we didn't go out to Regulation 19. If we'd have reacted in a knee-jerk reaction at that time and went out to Regulation 19, we would have just lost total control of our local plan. So I just think that, we were under a lot of pressure. I think we took the right decision, but my word, to find out later on that things are just going to flip back and it's nothing to worry about, I can imagine there are authorities all over the country that made some pretty difficult decisions that maybe they didn't need to make, looking at this in hindsight.
Thank you very much. Next to speak, I have Councillor Gregg.
I don't like to see our strategic officers with frowns. They work too hard for that. But I have to say, Mr. Edgerton, there was a second part to that decision that we made when we decided to go for June because we didn't know what the government were doing. June was chosen. We then knew that the government didn't go ahead with that date, but a decision was made to continue with the June date, to not leave things till the last minute and to ensure that we were in time, organised before anything was thrown at us at the last minute. So there was a second part to that decision. We did know that the government had changed their decision, and yet we still chose to choose June.
Thank you. Next to speak, I have Councillor Springett.
It was just a quick question. Can you please reassure us that we are going to get this done in time and we're not going to fall off the end of the flat earth and miss the deadline, please?
There isn't a flat earth when it comes to reviewing local plans. The circumstances are considered and a number of ways. There's the housing land supply, there's the previous housing delivery, there is the risk, of course, that the plan has become out of date. I think what the report will need to consider in July is where we actually are with the longer term issue of adoption, whether or not we are likely to slip beyond the October 2022 5 years, and what the implications of that are, what the risks are. And I think it also alludes to the points which were made by Councillor Clark as well. So I think I will certainly be seeking to address those points. At this stage, my personal view is that a very slight slip beyond October 2022, where managed, may not be catastrophic. It may not be the flat earth situation that we may anticipate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the last speaker we have this evening is Councillor Garden.
I think the word used was switch. I find it a bit strange tonight, although I am severely concerned about the delay, I must say, but I find it strange that the Liberal group now plays on how dangerous this delay is. I find this delay dangerous. I voted together with the Conservative group. I did vote to dispense with Regulation 18B in order to expedite things. I am concerned about the local plan going forward, timely. We don't have an SBI meeting in August, so therefore we need to get things done in July. I think that is our deadline here.
Thank you very much. Next I've got Phil, and then Russell, and then Councillor Grigg.
I think, Chair, just to say, Councillor Grigg is correct. There were two parts of that decision. There was the numbers that the government were providing that we weren't sure what the timing of that would be. There was the period that we could end up without cover of a plan. We took the decision, members took the decision. I think as officers we said at that time that there was risk built into the timescale that we were placing. So the June timescale that we said to come back with Reg 19, I think we were, as officers, we were very, very clear with members that even that timescale involved risk. Now, as we said, I won't go over the things about first homes and changes to retail rules and all of that again, but we've got the opportunity now to make sure that we get that right and to actually dispense with some of that risk that we talked about at that point. We will be looking to make this as short a delay as possible, and we will be looking to make sure that that second part of the consideration, which was term of without cover of a plan, is absolutely minimised.
Thank you very much. Russell, you indicated to speak as well.
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, you know, the timescales are still better than where they were when we first started off. Yeah, we've had a remarkable number of consultation responses considering the short period of time. The officer's done a remarkable job to get through all of those, and we're also in an unprecedented planning landscape at the moment. Yeah, we've got things like first homes which are coming through, which will affect the affordable housing element of it. And the government has only just this week, I think, released guidance on that. Yeah, so for the officers to take all of that on board, feed that into all the tables and all that they've got to do to get the local plan done between now and in this short period that is being asked for, I think is still doing a remarkable job.
Thank you very much. Next to speak, Councillor Grigg, please.
I'd just like to say that although I allowed the first comment to go, I'm not going to allow the second comment to go. And I'd like to remind all members of this committee that political comments do not help the residents of Maidstone and do not help get this local plan through. So can I please ask that we refrain from making political comments either side? And as a correction, all those decisions were made cross-party between Conservatives and Liberals. So don't you dare blame us for those.
Thank you very much, Councillor Grigg. Your point is taken. I don't see anyone else indicating to speak. So we'll move on to the recommendation, which is that this report be noted. Therefore, is that noted? Thank you very much. Just before I close the meeting, from the chair, I just, I appreciate that this is becoming a bit of a political matter. There are comments at the beginning of the meeting. I want to stress that Councillor Springett and I have made it very clear that we will work with everyone and use the expertise and the skill set which is here, including the former Vice Chairman of this committee. And Councillor Springett and I certainly do not intend to make it a political matter, and I don't believe that anyone in this room does either. But I do look forward to working with everyone, and I hope that we can put past sensitivities behind us. Thank you very much, members. I now declare that the meeting is closed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman.